Today on TFL Bike, we have a really cool opportunity to ride a Royal Enfield Continental GT. This is a motorcycle that Alex and I have both been really excited about for a long time, and we finally have the opportunity to throw a leg over this bike because this motorcycle's owner, Mario, was kind enough to ride it up here to our offices in Boulder so that we can look at it, talk about it, and get it out on the road. So this is everything that you need to know about the Continental GT. Powering the Continental GT is a 648cc parallel twin, and this is a genuinely pretty retro engine design, which makes it really cool. It is air and oil cooled, single overhead cam, although it is 4 valves per cylinder. It is also fuel injected, and it's got a 6-speed transmission, so it's modern in a number of really useful ways, but other than that, it is very retro. It's a 270-degree parallel twin, which is a layout that we like a lot because it gives the firing order and this engine just a little bit more character. And power output is not massive. It is just 650 cc's, so it's 47 horsepower, 38 pound-feet of torque. But what I'm really excited about with this engine is, again, the character of it, that it's genuinely a very old-school design. Up front on the Continental GT, you have a very classic wire spoke 18-inch wheel with a single 320mm disc and a bi-bray brake, as well as some standard forks here. So again, very, very old school, but aesthetically, it perfectly matches the rest of this motorcycle. Around the rear, you also have an 18-inch wire spoke wheel, as well as a single 240mm disc back here, and you have twin shocks in the rear. Once again, very old school, but it's just exactly what you would want to see on a motorcycle like this. Visually, this motorcycle doesn't really give you a whole lot of clues that it's anything but a vintage bike. I mean, it looks a lot like a vintage motorcycle, and actually this bike's owner, Mario, was telling me that a lot of times he gets stopped about this bike and people ask him if it's been restored because it really does look that retro. You've got a halogen headlight up front with this polished bucket, and this is the most expensive option for the color scheme on this bike, but the chrome tank looks so classic, and seeing it in person too, the shine on this is just phenomenal. You've also got a bunch of beautifully polished engine covers here, and again, I mean, you've got regular halogen bulbs in the lights here. This owner, he also pulled the plastic tail section off of this bike. He's made a couple modifications to it, including this pipe, all of which have helped this bike keep kind of its old school looks. But it's one of my favorite things about this motorcycle is just walking up to it, the way that it looks. And again, in keeping with that theme, you have analog gauges here for your speedometer and your tachometer. You do have a small LCD screen there. So again, functionally, this bike has some nice modern features like that trip odometer and your fuel indicator there, but otherwise, it's very subtle. In most ways, you would imagine that this could very well be a vintage bike. This I am so excited about because at the channel, I am definitely more of the retro guy. Alex loves his sport bikes, and I love me some old school bikes. And this, I mean, this is about as old school as a brand new motorcycle gets. Oh yeah. Sounds pretty nice too. I mean, this pipe he's got, not super loud, but I think it's just the right amount of noise. Also, stepping onto the bike, pretty low seat height, very manageable, even though I'm only 5'10". Mario, this motorcycle's owner, is about 6'3", and I guess he still fits on the bike. But yeah, even somebody on the shorter side like me has no problem on this motorcycle. And actually, so you know, you look at this bike and think that it's likely pretty aggressive in its riding position because at a glance you see that it's got clip-ons, but these clip-ons have some pretty significant risers, so it's not as leaned forward as it looks like it would be. You're definitely still hunched over a bit. I mean, as far as being hunched over on a motorcycle goes, this is far from the most hunched over I've ever been. And now, let's ring it out and see how the power is. You know, it's better than I thought it would be, because on paper 47 horsepower sounds so low, but it's decently torquey, so it's got absolutely no problem whatsoever keeping up with traffic. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you're a speed demon, if you like really fast bikes, then a 650 air-cooled single overhead cam motorcycle is just not going to be the bike for you. But where I think this motorcycle is absolutely perfect is giving you the experience of motorcycling, and even a lot of the experience of vintage motorcycling, without you having to deal with the part of vintage motorcycle that involves you having to work on your bike all the time. So you really get that experience, but in a brand new bike that you can trust to go down the road, down the highway, and not have any of its wheels fall off. And that's huge because, I mean, vintage motorcycles are massively popular. People really love the style of these old bikes. And look, you know, I don't mind working on my motorcycles, but even for me, it does get old. This is essentially a vintage motorcycle, but it's brand new, and it gives you so little to worry about because it is fuel injected, and that makes it, I mean, really beginner friendly if you're looking for a first motorcycle, but it also just creates a lack of headaches for those who want to have a vintage style bike and just get out and ride. And it sounds really good. I mean, this is classic parallel twin, very British, and I love that noise. It makes it a really entertaining bike to ride. I'm also noticing too that this bike seems pretty happy to tip in. Now, we're here in the Front Range of Colorado, and as you can probably tell from just looking around me right now, where we are is pretty flat, and a lot of just straight kind of grid patterned roads, so it's difficult to really do a proper test of a bike's handling without taking a bigger trip up into the mountains. But, you know, I mean, just at a quick glance, this bike feels like it would be a pretty fun handling motorcycle. And that's something too to be said about a smaller displacement bike, although to be fair, this is not an extremely light motorcycle. It is 445 pounds, which is getting to be on the heavier side, and that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of metal here, and it's a steel tube chassis, a cradle type frame. So yeah, again, I mean, it's genuinely a very old school design, but I really just think that they've done it right. And you know, this isn't a press loan bike. It's not a motorcycle that we'll get to spend a whole lot of time with, but it's a bike that at a glance I really am enjoying right now, and that I would love at some point to spend more time on. Really appreciate Mario bringing his bike for me to ride, and it's not easy to trust somebody to hop on your motorcycle and take it around the block, especially a YouTuber. So to wrap things up, I'll mention the price, which is really one of the best things about this. It's a $7,000 motorcycle, and this is the most expensive bike in the most expensive color scheme that you can get from Royal Enfield. This chrome tank makes it a $7,000 bike. They start just over $6 grand. So, I mean, $7 grand for the most expensive bike, if I'm not mistaken, that Royal Enfield sells right now, is really reasonable. And I mean, like we've been talking about, it's not the fastest bike in the world, and you can get a much faster bike for $7,000. But if you want that build quality and that aesthetic of a vintage bike, this is every bit of that for a price that you can reasonably justify. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below of this Royal Enfield Continental GT, and let us know if you want to see more videos on some Royal Enfield bikes, because I personally would love to spend some more time on Royal Enfield bikes. That's all, and we'll see you all in the next video.